Hi guys, welcome back to another video. Today I wanted to walk you through the process of how I created this scene in Nomad Sculpt. Before we begin, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy it. It really helps my channel a ton and I appreciate it greatly. I will say I thought about recording after I had already finished the head, so that won't be in here, but if you guys would like to see a video on a stylized head, let me know down below. Starting right off, as always, I'm blocking out my shape using my reference image, which is my own concept. I use a sphere to create the torso, and I always lowered the subdivision to about a level 3 before I validated in order to have more control over the movements. And once I'm happy with that overall shape, I can always subdivide. I group all of my head elements and neck together, and I move the pivot of the group to the base of that neck so that I can rotate them together in order to start posing my character to better match that concept. At this point, having the head and torso, I can start to position my character to closely match the reference image. That way, as I create the limbs, I can simply pose them accordingly as well. I like to use the tube tool for my arms and legs, making sure to mirror that so I don't have to do it twice. Now, because this is a very stylized character, I am looking for the noodly arm effect, so I'm making sure to use B-spline. I also realized here that I wanted my neck to feel less stiff and look closer to the reference image, so I'm replacing the original cylinder that I used for a tube that will allow me to create that curve on the neck. I've used a sphere to create the pelvis, and I'm just going to once again lower the subdivisions so that it is easier to tweak using the move tool. I'm going to add my legs with the tube tool as well, making sure to B-spline those. And I'm rounding out those points in the profile window to create that more tube-like shape. For the feet, I also use a sphere. I mirrored that and scaled it down to create a general shoe shape. Later I will add more details, but for now I'm more worried about just blocking out some of these shapes. I did the same thing for the hands using a sphere, and for the fingers I used the tube tool. I'm only making 4 fingers. I don't know why, but that's just a choice I make. I'm then adding a cylinder for the bicycle tires to help me pose the character a little bit more accurately. I've also activated holes in my cylinder in order to get it to look more like actual tires. I'm using tubes for the bicycle frame. I will tell you right now, this bicycle is not anatomically sound, but I was following my drawing once again due to the style of this piece. I really just wanted to try and simplify the shapes as much as possible while still creating a recognizable shape. The majority of this bike is made with cylinders or tubes and simply just tweaking them and posing them until they feel right, as you can see here. I used a cube to create the pedal. I lowered the subdivisions and then I just adjusted its shape with the move tool to have a more rounded front and a tapered back. At this point, I'm ready to merge my frame together, so I voxel remesh it at about 200 and then I softly smooth it all out. Now I bring my character back so that I can create the handlebars. Once again using my tube tool, and this time I work in mirror form so that I can create those little bends on each side of the handlebar. I added a sphere to create the seat, and once again just tweak that using the move tool to get that rough bicycle seat, and then I placed it under my character. To create these poles on the bike tire, I used the tube tool as well, using a radial array to duplicate those around the tire. If you're having a hard time with the radial tool, you need to make sure that the actual radial pivot is centered to the object that you're trying to duplicate around. Now, to add more detail to the shoes, I'm going to use the trim tool to cut the bottom of the sphere in order to create that flat edge. I'm going to then voxel remesh that to get rid of those crispy edges and smooth them out. I'm also using a cylinder to create the boot part of the shoe, making sure to toggle hole on it and then adjust it accordingly to fit the leg. Once I'm happy with the position, I voxel remesh the cylinder and the sphere together to join them, and I smooth those out. To add a little bit more detail, I'm going to create what's apparently called the midsole of the shoe by masking out the area using the mask selection tool and then extracting that out slightly. Similarly to that, I'm going to create some little cheeks on my character by masking them out and then extracting them lightly. Now for the fun part, I'm going to create the road in which our character is riding on using a cube and making that really big to make sure I cover up the space and making sure it's also wide enough for our character to be on. I'm going to validate that and mask out the area I want to trim off using the selection tool. Then using the split command, making sure that fill holes is selected. I'm going to voxel remesh it to get rid of any rough edges, and then I'm going to gently smooth it out. I'm going to do the same exact thing for the hills in the back using a much thinner cube this time. Once again using the mask selection tool to draw out the shape, and then selecting split and deleting the excess piece. Afterwards, we can voxel remesh and then smooth out those edges. And then one last time for the mountain in the background, same exact process, voxel remesh and smooth out the edges. I'm going to start merging some of the areas of my character together, but before I do that, I'm creating a collar for his shirt using a cylinder with holes, and then I'm merging that by selecting both the meshes and then voxel remesh them at around 200 to keep the details, and then smoothing them out slightly. I'm going to do the same exact thing with the arms. Just make sure that you're happy with the pose before you start to voxel remesh things together, because it will get rid of your tube controllers, so it'll be a lot harder to try and tweak once it is all merged. With our character done, I'm going to start adding all the little plants and shrubbery to our scene. I'm going to start with a low subdivision sphere, duplicating that to create the silhouette of the first bush, and then voxel remeshing it together and smoothing it out. I want to create those little berries on the bush, so I'm using the mask to paint out some dots and then extracting them out. It did extract it out on both sides, as you can see, so I'm just going to use the trim tool to get rid of the back side since we don't need that. I'm going to duplicate that bush shape and bring it over to the other side. Using the drag tool, I'm going to adjust its shape so that it is closer to the reference and also just different from the other one. I'm using the tube tool to create the tree trunk as well as the tree branches. To create a more interesting silhouette, I'm going to taper the tube by making the radius smaller at the top and wider at the base. With the sphere, I'm going to make the actual bush, having it at low subdivisions, validating that, and then using the move tool to shape that accordingly and place it behind my tree branch. I'm going to make a flower by using a sphere and squashing it down, then using my move tool to shape it into the form of a petal. I'm going to use the radial array to duplicate that petal around the center of the flower. And then I'm just going to place it around the hills in the background using the instance tool to duplicate that. I'm creating the plant that is in our foreground using the tube tool for the stem. And then similarly to that flower petal, I'm going to use a sphere to shape it into the form of a leaf. And then I'm just going to duplicate those down the stem accordingly, while also scaling them up to create some variety. Moving on to the next tree, once again with the tube tool for my tree trunk and tapering it at the very top. I'm using a sphere to create the bush. This time I'm going to scale it down and squash it to create a wider shape. Then I'm going to duplicate that twice and stack each on top of the other, making sure to scale them down. Once I'm done, I'm going to voxel remesh those and then smooth them out. For the snow cap on our mountain, I'm going to mask it out using the lasso tool. Similarly to the way we did the cheeks and the shoes, I'm going to extract that shape out. I'm creating little grass chunks using the tube tool, tapering it to a very sharp point, and then just duplicating it a couple of times, making sure that I pose each one accordingly to different directions, the way grass would probably behave. Then I'll just join those shapes together and duplicate it so that I can reuse it throughout my scene. I'm using a sphere for the sun. and what I'm referring to as sunbeams with the tube tool. I'm just playing around with the shape a bit and then using the radial array to duplicate it around the sun. I eventually end up simplifying the shape and creating smaller ones in between. Lastly, I'm adding clouds. Similarly to the way we did the bushes, I'm going to use spheres to create an overall cloud silhouette. And then I'm just going to voxel remesh those together and smooth them out. I'm also going to duplicate it and then just rotate it 180 degrees in order to bring it to the other side, and that way we get a different cloud silhouette. I also went ahead and trimmed the sharp edges of our road because they were really bothering me. I voxel remeshed it and then just smoothed it out. But that is the final sculpt, guys. This is what it looks like, and I'll show you as well what it looked like after I painted it. And then the final render, which was done in Blender using Cyclist, which was actually my first time using Blender. But I do hope that this video was helpful. As always, if you have any questions or suggestions, leave them down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you on the next video.